Welcome everyone. I'm going to start reading the book. Thank you. Masters, I think we have started from this page. Let me start. There was never any shortage of bodies for dissection. Bodies in Shukin at that time were very easily obtained, committed. Later, when the war started, we were to have more corpses that we could deal with. But these, which were obtained for dissections, we kept in an underground room, which was fresh, carefully cooked. As soon as we could obtain a fresh body from the streets or from the hospital, we used to inject into the blood a most powerful disinfectant that served to preserve the body for some months. It was quite interesting to go down to the basement and see the bodies on slabs and notice how invariably they were thin bodies. We used to have quite heated disputes at which of us should have the thinnest. The fat bodies were great trouble in dissecting, so there was so much labor with so little result. One could go cutting, dissecting out a nerve or an artery, and have to dissect away a layer after layer of fatty tissues. Bodies were not in short supply at all. Frequently, we had so many on hand, we kept them in tans and pickle as of course, it was not always easy to smuggle a body into the hospital because some of the relatives had strong opinions about such things. In those days, young babies who had died were abandoned in streets, while adults whose families were too poor to pay for a satisfactory funeral left them on the streets under cover of darkness. We, medical students, frequently went out in the early morning to pick up the best looking bodies and, of course, the leanest. We could have the whole body to ourselves. Often we worked two into the corridor, one doing the head, other doing the feet. That was more companionable. Quite frequently we had our lunch in the dissecting room if we were studying for some examination. It was no uncommon thing to see a student with his head spread out on the stomach of a cadaver, while his textbook, which was he reading, would be propped up against a tie. It was never occurred to us at the time we could have named all sorts of curious complaints through affection from dead bodies. Our principal, Dr. Lee, had all the latest American ideas. In some ways, he was almost a crank for copying the Americans. But no matter, he was a good man, one of the most brilliant Chinamen that I have met. It was a pleasure to study with him. I learned a lot and passed many examinations, but I still maintain that I learned far more about autonomy from the body breakers of Tibet. Our college, the attached hospital, were far end of the road, away from the docks, along with from the street steps. In the fine weather, we had a good view across the river. Across the terrace fields, because it was a very position, a prompted landmark, in fact, towards the harbor, in a more business section of the street, was an old shop, looking as it was in the last stages of decay. The woodwork appeared to be worm-eaten. The paint was flaking from the boards. The door was ramshackle and rickety. Above it was a cut-out wooden figure of a gaudily painted tiger. It was so arranged that it arched back off over the entrance. The yawning jaws with ferocious-looking teeth, and the claws were realistic enough to strike fear into everyone's heart. This tiger was meant to show fertility. It is the old Chinese emblem for fertility. This shop was a beacon for run-down men, those who had wished to have greater vulgar, which pursue their amusements. Women too went here to get certain compounds, extract of tiger or extract of ginseng, when they wanted children. For some reason, apparently, could not. Extract of tiger or extract of ginseng contain large quantities of substances which help the men and women in difficult times. Substances which have only been discovered by Western science, who hail it as the great trumpet of commerce and research. The Chinese and the Tibetans did not know such modern research, and they had those compounds for 3 or 4,000 years. And of the most boosted unduly about it is the fact that the West could learn so much from the East if the West had been was a little bit more cooperative. But to turn to this old shop with a fierce tiger carved and painted above it, with a window full of strange-looking powders, mummies, and bottles of colored liquid, this was a shop of an old-style medical product, which it was possible to obtain powdered horns of an antelope ground to powder, to act as a aphrodisiac, and other strange concominations. Not often in those poor quarters did the patients go to the modern surgery of the hospital for treatment. Instead, he went to this dirty old shop in the same way his father has done, perhaps as his father's fathers had done also. He took his complaints to the physician in charge, who sat looking like an owl with powerful lensed spectacles behind a broad wooden barrier, who discussed his case symptoms, and old Fiston would suddenly nod his head with fingertips touching. He would ponderously prescribe the necessary medicine. One convention was that the medicine had to be according to a special code that was an unwritten rule from the time before history. For stomach complaint, the medicine would be yellow. Easy masters. While the patients suffering from the blood or heart disease would have a red medicine. Those afflicted from bile or liver complaints, or even excessively bad temper, would have green medicine. Patients who were suffering from eye troubles would have blue lotion. The interior of a person presented with great problems regarding which thought to be an essential organ, the medicine would be brown. A recreant mother who had only she was told to take a pulverous flesh of a turtle. The baby would be born painlessly, easily, almost before she was aware of it. So her day's work would not be interfered with. One injunction was, go home, put on an apron around you, between your legs, so the baby shall not drop and strike the floor, then swallow the pulverous flesh of a turtle. The old unresisted Chinese doctor would advertise, and he did in most spectacular manner. Usually he had a large sign, an immense painted sign above his house to show what a wonderful hero he was. Not only that, but in his way to whom surgery would be found with great medals and shields, with wealthy and frightened patients had given him to testify to miraculous ways in which he should be, with colored medicine, powders, and potions which cured them of unknown and unspecified diseases. The poor dentist was not so lucky. The oldest dentist, that is, most of the time he had no particular house in which to see the patients, but he saw them in the street. The victim sat on a box, and the dentist carried on his examinations, poking and probing on the full view of appreciative audience. Then a lot of strange motives and gesticulations, he would proceed to extract the false teeth. Proceed is the right term. If the patient was frightened or excessively noisy, it was not really easy to do an extraction, and at times the dentist would not hesitate to call upon bystanders to hold the struggling victim. There was no unnecessary use. The doctors did not advertise as the dentists did not advertise as the doctors did, with signs and shields and medals. Instead, around his neck he wore strings of teeth which he had extracted. And whenever he had extracted a tooth, the tooth would be picked up, carefully cleaned, a hole drilled through it. It would then be threaded on to a string. That one more testimony of a skilled dentist who had pulled so many. It used to annoy us when patients whom we had lavished much time and care and to whom we had the latest treatment and prescribed expensive drugs kept sternly into the back entrance of an old Chinese doctor premises by treatment by him. We claimed that we cured the patient, the quack claimed that he cured, but the patient said nothing. He was too glad to be free of his ill. As we became more and more advanced in our studies, walked the wards of the hospital, we had frequent occasions which we go out with a full qualified doctor to treat people in their own homes, to assist for operations. Sometimes we had to descend cliffs to inaccessible places, perhaps to some place where one poor unfortunate had fallen over, shattered his bones, or electric flesh almost beyond repair. We had visits to who had floating homes above rivers. In the Kyling River, there were people who lived on houseboats, or even vast rafts of bamboo covered with matting on which they erect little huts. These swayed and bobbed at the bank of the river. Unless we were careful practically at night, it was remarkably easy to miss one's footing or stand firm on a loose piece of bamboo which merely sank beneath one. Then one was not cheered at all by the laughter of the invariable small crowd of boys who always gathered on such unfortunate occasions. The Chinese peasants were able to put with amazing amount of pain. They never complained, and they were always grateful for what we could do for them. We used to go out on our way to help old people, perhaps to clean up their little hut or prepare food for them. With the younger generations, we were not so pleasant. They were getting restive. They were getting strange ideas. The man from Moscow was circulating among them, preparing them for advent of communism. We knew it, but There was nothing we could do except stand by and watch helplessly. But before we became so qualified, we had an enormous amount of study to do. Study for a whole diversity of subjects. As long as 14 hours a day. Magnetism as well as electricity, to quote just two. I remember the first lecture I attended on magnetism. Then it was a subject almost entirely unknown to me. It is perhaps as interesting in its way as which I attend electricity. The lecture was not a pleasant individual, but here's what happened. Colin pushed his way through the crowd to read notices on the board to see where we were going for the next class. He started reading and then said, "Oi, look, son," he called out to me. "We got a lecture on magnetism." We were glad to see that we were in the same class after we formed such a sincere friendship. We walked to the quadrangle, across and into the classroom next door to that devoted to electricity. We entered. Inside there was a lot of equipment with the same, seemed to us, as dealing with electricity proper. Coils of wire, strange pieces of metal bent through into a horseshoe shape, like rods, glass rods, and various of glass boxes containing what looked like water and bits of wooden lid. We took our places. The lecturer came and stopped ponderously to the table. He was a heavy man, heavy in body, heavy in mind. Certainly he had a very good opinion of his abilities. A far greater opinion of abilities than his colleagues had of them. He had been to America, but some of the other studio staff had pretended unknowing how little they really knew. This one was utterly convinced he knew everything, that his brain was infallible. He took his place. For some reason, he picked up a wooden hammer and whacked it violently on his desk. "Silence!" he roared. Although there had not been any sun. "Today we are going to do magnetism. The first lecture some of you had picked on this absorbing subject," he said. He picked one of the bars, but threw it into the horse-shaped shoe. "This," he said, "has a field around." I immediately thought of grazing horses. He said, I am going to show you how to outline the field of the magnet with iron dust magnetism. We'll activate each particle of this iron, which is going to show you, then draw itself the exact outline of the force which motivates it. I cautiously remarked to her, who was sitting behind me, "But any fool can see it now. Now, why tamper with it?" The lecturer jumped up in furious temper. "Oh," he said, "the great Lama of Tibet doesn't know the first thing of magnetism or electricity, can see a magnetic field." He stabbed the finger violently in my direction. "So, great Lama, you could see this wonderful field, can you? The only man in existence, perhaps," he said sneeringly. I said, "Oh, yes, an honorable lecturer. I can see it very clearly. I said, I could also see the lights around those wires." He took his wooden hammer again and brought it down to the decks, which is a succession of resounding crashes on his decks. "You lie!" No one can see it. If you're so clever, draw it on the board for me. Then we will see what sort of mess you make of it. I said wearily as I went up to him, picked up the magnet, and went to the blackboard with a piece of chalk. The magnet I put flat on the board. Then I drew around it to the exact shape of a bluish light, which I could see coming from the magnet. I drew also the lightest versions which were in the field itself. It was a simple matter for me. I had been born with this ability and had ability increased by operations. There were absolute dead silence when I had finished. I turned around. The lecturer was watching me. His eyes were literally bulging. You have studied this before. It's a trick. Honorable lecturer, I replied. Until this day, I've never seen one of these magnets. Well, I don't know how you do it, but that is the correct field. I still maintain that it is trick. I still maintain in Tibet you only learn trickery. I do not understand it. He took the magnet from me, covered it with a thin sheet of paper, and on the paper he sprinkled fine iron dust. With the finger he tapped on the paper. The dust took to the exact particles of the shape which I had drawn in the blackboard. He looked at it. He looked at my drawings. He looked at the back of the outline with iron fillings. I still do not believe you, man from Tibet, he said. I still think this is a trick. He sat down wearily and propped his head in his hands. Then with explosive violence, he jumped and shot his aim at me again. He said, You cannot. You said that you can see the field magnet. You also said I could see around this. You also said that I can see the lights around those wires. That is so. I replied, I can see them easily. Right, he shouted. Now we need to prove you wrong. Prove you a fake. He wheeled around, knocking over his chair in temper. He hurried to a box, bent down with a grunt, picked up a box with wires protruding into a coil from the top. He picked up and placed it on the table in front of me. Now, he said. Now, here is a very interesting box, known as a high-frequency box. You could draw the field of that from me, and I will believe you. There you are, you draw the field. He looked at me and said, I'll dare you to. I said, all right, it's simple enough. Let's put it near the blackboard. Otherwise, I should be doing it by memory. He picked up one end, and I picked up the other. We moved it right close to the blackboard. I took the chalk and turned it away from the board. Oh, I said, it's all gone. I looked in amazement because there was just wires, nothing else, no field. Hand was on the switch. He had switched off the color. There was an absolute look of satisfaction on his face. So he said, you really could see that? Well, how remarkable. He switched it on again and said, turn away from me and tell when it is on and when it is off. I turned away from him and I was able to tell him off, on, off. Left it off, then he sat in his chair in the attitude of a man whose faith had received a crushing blow that he had done. He said, class dismissed. Turning to me, said, not you, I want to speak you alone. Others muttered with resentment. They'd come for a lecture, now they had found some interest. Why should they be turned out now? Just shoot them out, taking one or two by the shoulder to hustle them more quickly. The lecturer's word was law. With the classroom emptied, he said, "Now tell me more of this. What sort of trick is it?" I said, "It is not a trick. It is a facility which I was born with, which was strengthened by special operation. I can see yours. I can see yours. From that, I know that you don't want to believe. You do not want to believe that anyone has ability that which you have not. You want to prove me wrong." "No," he said. "I do not want to prove you wrong. I want to prove that my own training, my own knowledge is right. And if you could see this aura, then tell me what I have taught is wrong." "Not at all," I replied. "I say that your training goes to prove that existence of aura, because of the very little that I have studied of electricity in this college. It indicates me that the human being is powered by electricity." "What utter nonsense," he said. "What about absolute heresy," and jumped to his feet and said, "Come with me to the principal. We will get this thing settled." Dr. Lee was sitting in his desk, busily engaged with the papers of the college. He looked up mildly as he entered, peering over from the top of his glasses. Then he removed them to see us the more clearly. Reverend Principal, Baldale, lecturer, this fellow from Tibet says he could see the aura, and that we all have auras. He's trying to tell me he knows more than I, the professor of electricity and magnetism. Dr. Lee mildly motioned us to be seated and then said, "Well, what is it precisely? Lobsang Rampa can see auras, that I know. Of what do you complain?" The lecturer was absolutely gapped in astonishment. "But you, Reverend Principal," he explained, you believe in such nonsense, such heresy, such trickery?" "Most assuredly I do," said Dr. Lee. He comes from the highest in Tibet. I have heard from him from the highest." Po Chu looked really crestfallen. Then Dr. Lee said to me and said, "Lobsan, Grandpa, I will ask you to tell us in your own word about this aura. Tell us about if we knew nothing whatever about the subject. Tell us so we may understand, perhaps profit your specialized experience." Well, that was quite a different matter. I don't like Lee. I like the way he handled things. "Dr. Lee," I said, when I was born with the ability to see people as they really were, they have an aura around them which portrays every fluctuation of thought, every vibration in health, the mental and spiritual conditions. The aura is in the light caused by the spirit within. For the first couple of years of my life, I thought everyone saw as I did. As soon as I learned it was not so, that you are aware, I entered the laboratory at the age of 7 and underwent special training. Laboratory, I was given a special operation to make me see even greater clarity, which I had seen before, which also gave me additional powers in the days before history was. I went on. Man had third eye. Through his folly, man had lost the power to use his sight. And that was the purpose of my training in Lhasa. Looked at them and saw that they were thinking, and very well. "Dr. Lee," I went on, "the human body is surrounded first by a bluish light, a light perhaps an inch, perhaps 2 inches thick. That follows, it covers the whole body of home. of the physical body. It is what we call the etheric body. It is the lowest of the bodies. It is a connection between the astral world and the physical. Intensity of blue varies according to a person's health. Then beyond the body, beyond the etheric body too, there is an aura. It varies in size enormously depending on the state of evolution of the person concerned. Just depending on also the standard of education of this person upon his thoughts. Your own aura is the length of a man away from you. I said to the principal, an aura of an evolved man, the aura, whatever it's, the human aura is whatever it said, is composed of swirling bands of colors, like clouds of colors different in evening sky. The altar with a person's thoughts. There were zones on the body, special zones which produce a horizontal bands of color. Yesterday, I said, when I was working in the library, I saw some pictures of the book on Western religious belief. Here they were portrayed figures which had auras around their heads. Does this mean people of the West who I had inferred to see auras while the East cannot? These pictures of the people of the West, I carried on, had only auras around their head, but I can see not merely around the head, but the whole body, around the fingers, feet. It is a thing that is always seen. The principal turned to Pochu. There, you see, this is information which I had before. I knew Ramba had this trouble. He had used his power on the belief behalf of the leaders of Tibet. That is why he is studying with us. So it is hoped he can assist in developing a special device which would be all of the greatest benefit to mankind in connection with detection and the cure of disease. What has caused you to come here today? Yes, the lecturer was looking very thoughtful, he said. He replied, we were just considering practomagnetism. Before I could show anything, as I spoke about the fields, the man said he could see the fields around the magnet, which I was utterly fantastic, and which I knew to be utterly fantastic. So I invited him to demonstrate on the blackboard. To my astonishment, he went on. He was able to draw a field around the blackboard. He was also able to draw the current field of a high-frequency transformer, but it was switched off. You could see nothing. I'm pretty sure it was a trick. He looked indefinitely at the principal and said, no, Dr. Lee. No, said the Dr. Lee. Indeed, it is no trick. It was no trick at all. For it is known to me, some years ago, I met his guide, the Lama Mingya Dondam, one of the most cleverest men in Tibet. He, out of goodness of his heart, underwent sudden tests out of friendship for me. He proved that he could do the same as Ken Lopes-Had Grappa. We were able that is a special group to us, make serious researches in the matter, but unfortunately produced conversion and the jealousy prevented us from publishing our findings. This is a thing which I regretted ever since. There was a silence for a time. I thought how good it was of the principal to declare his faith for me. The lecturer was looking very gloomy as he received an unexpected, unwelcome setback. He said, if you really have this power, why are you studying medicine? I replied, I want to study medicine and I want to study science as well. So I may assist in the preparation of a of a similar device I saw in the Changtang highlands of Tibet. The principal broke in and said, "Yes, I know you were on one of those men who went to the expedition. I would like to know more about this device." Some time ago, I said, at the instigation of Dalai Lama, a small party of us went to a hidden valley in the mountain of Changahang, Tibet. Here we found a city dating back to long before we could see. A city of a bygone race. The city practically buried in the ice of a glacier, where the glacier had melted in the hidden valley, when it was warm, the buildings and the devices contained in the buildings were intact. One of the parts was a 4-member box which could look and see the human aura. From that aura, from the colors, from the general appearance, they could deduce the state of the person, of the health of a person. More, they could see if a person was likely to be afflicted in the flesh by any disease which probably showed in the same aura before it was manifest in the flesh. In the same way, the germs of Colgus show in the aura long before they manifest in the flesh as a common cold. It is a far easier matter to cure a person when they only change with a complaint. The disease can be addicted before it attains the healing. The principal nodded and said, "This is what most interesting." I said, "Go on." I went in. I visualized a modern version of that old apparatus. I would like to assist in the preparation of a similar device, so that even the most known Cloria doctor or surgeon can look through the box and see the aura of a person in color. You could also have a matching chart, and with that chart, you would know what was actually wrong with the person. He would also be able to diagnose it without difficulties or accuracy at all. "But," said the lecturer, "you are too late. We have X-rays already." "X-rays," said Dr. Lee. "Oh, my dear fellow, they are useless for purposes such as this. They merely show gray shadows of the bones. Lobson does not want to show the bones. He wants to show the life force of the body itself." I understand precisely what he means. I'm sure the biggest difficulty in which he would be confronted by Pridge's professional jealousy turned to me again. He said, "How could one help in mental complaints with such a device?" "Reverend Principal," he said. I said, "if a person has a split personality, the aura shows indeed very clearly because it shows the dual aura. And I maintain with the suitable apparatus, the auras could be pushed into one, perhaps by a high frequency electricity. Now I am writing this in the West, and I'm finding that there is much interest in these matters. Many of the medical names of high members have been turned into interest. But when the ability said I must not mention the names when we prejudice their reputation, there were so many few remarks of interest. Have you ever seen the power cables with a slight haze? If so, practically in the mountains, you'll see corona around the wires. That is the faint light encircling the wires. If your sight is very good, you will see the light flicker, wane and grow as the current coursing through the wires at last in property. That is the same as a human aura. The old people, our great ancestors, evidently could see hollows because they were able to paint on pictures of saints. That surely could not be done by anyone of imagination, because it was the imagination only. Why paint the head? Why paint it on the head when there was actually light? Modern science has already measured the waves of the body, the brain, and measured the voltage of a human body. There is, in fact, one famous hospital where research was undertaken into X-rays. The researchers found that taking pictures of the human aura, but they would not understand what they're taking, nor did they care. They were trying to photograph bones, not the colors of the outside of the body. And they looked upon this autograph on the unmentioned nuisance. Tragically, the whole matter of relating to aura was photographs. He was shocked while they progressed with X-rays, which in my humble opinion is the wrong way. I am utterly convinced that with little research, doctors and surgeons could provide a wonderful aid for curing the sick. I visualized, as I did many years ago, a special apparatus which any doctor could carry with him in his pocket, and he could produce it and view a patient through the way one takes a piece of smoked glass to see the sun. Masters, I will stop sharing. And thank you, Masters, for listening. I am going to do interaction now. I'm going to start.